All right, we're live. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug. I am with my mom today, Sister Sharon, our Brother Yahusha, our Sister Marissa, and we are going to be continuing our Sabbath day studies here. We got to start off, we're going to be doing Ecclesiastes chapter 1. All right, pull my physical microphone. All right, there we go. Okay, Brother Dennis, I think just got in. Shabbat Shalom, Brother Dennis. We're starting at Ecclesiastes 1 here. So let me just drop down. Okay, Ecclesiastes 1. All right, and I'll be reading from the Septuagint here, side of the screen here. Okay. The words of the preacher, the son of Daud, king of Yasharal. Okay. Interesting. Vanity of vanities, said the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What advantage is there to a man in all his labor that he takes under the sun? A generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth abides forever. And the sun arises, and the sun goes down and draws towards its place. Notice how it says the sun rises, and then it goes down towards its place. So again, rises, sets. It doesn't go around and around and around in outer space. Okay. The rise there proceeds southward and goes towards the north. So it's talking about, sunset, sunrise, east. So there it's saying that it's rising towards the north, or my bad, it's rising in southward and goes around toward the north. So the wind goes around, wind returns to its circuits. And circuits is not talking about heliocentricity. It's talking about to understand fully in flat earth the way it sets, it's going like this. So on a flat earth map, it would be, even though it's going around, it's going up and down in a circuit. So just to explain that, because I know some people will interpret that with heliocentrism in mind. All rivers run into the sea, and yet the sea is not filled to the place from which the rivers come. There they return again. All things are full of labor. A man will not be able to speak of them, neither shall the eye be satisfied with seeing, neither shall the ear be filled with hearing. What is that which has been? Is that which shall be? And what is that? No, that has been done. The very thing which shall be done, and there's nothing new under the sun. So, meaning what has is what will be. So, I believe we can even take this into end times interpretation. The way it was partially fulfilled is the way it should be fully fulfilled. For example, there's a lot of weird eschatology out there on YouTube. Like people want to say, this or that, they had a dream and now it's supposed to be fulfilled in this way instead of the way the word says it's supposed to be fulfilled. According to Solomon here, what has been is what shall be. So, for example, like the abomination of desolation, right? It was partially fulfilled with Antiochus, right? I'll get to you, brother. I'm sorry. I'll get to you in a second. I just want to kind of give a decent example here. So remember how it was partially fulfilled in the book of Maccabees, where you had them sacrificing a pig on the altar, on Yahuwah's altar, and then you had them desecrate his temple, like pollute his temple physically. Then you had supposedly Antiochus would have sat on that throne in that temple. What Paul says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 cannot contradict the way it was fulfilled once. It has to be fulfilled that way again, because that's the way it was spoken to be fulfilled. So I know there's a lot of people that want to say AI is going to be the image of the beast. but the image of the beast has to be a graven image. It can't be a computer. Okay. So the point I'm trying to make is if what has been what is what will be again, that means, in my opinion, that means that you can't have one thing fulfilled in a specific way in scripture that was spoken to be fulfilled and then be fulfilled again in the final fulfillment in a completely different way that's never spoken of, is what I'm trying to say. So, just like Mark of the Beast, there's foreshadows to Mark of the Beast in Ezekiel and this and that, and it's always talking about someone's right hand in their forehead, as in their mind and their actions. So that's part of it too. It's not just a barcode. It's about what's in your heart and what you do is part of the mark of the beast as well, because we see that in Ezekiel where he, it says, mark these people with Yahuwah's mark that groan over the lawlessness that's being committed. So if Yahuwah's mark is the one, is people groaning over lawlessness, those that will take the mark of the beast will be those that don't care about committing lawlessness, that rejoice in lawlessness, if that makes any sense. So the prophecy should always be, if there's multiple fulfillments, it should always copy one another. It shouldn't be some weird new fulfillment that is completely different, or even contradictory to the way it was partially fulfilled. So anyway, go ahead, brother. I know you wanted to say something. Okay, never mind. My bad. So, but that's just something I wanted to kind of comment on, because I see all this on the YouTube land. Everyone's now a prophet. Everyone has dreams now. I'm not saying you don't, and that there's not people that have legitimate dreams from Yahuwah, but Israel, it was never in Israel that every Israelite was a prophet. It was never that way. It was never that way. So when I see like 80-90% of people making videos are claiming to be in the agency of prophecy, to me that's kind of a red flag. So anyway, but and again, I'm not a cessationist. I know some people are going to claim that I'm a cessationist. I'm not. I do believe the gifts are still for today. But what I'm trying to say is not every believer should be a prophet or claiming to be a prophet. And the prophets themselves never said, "Hey guys, I'm a prophet." They never did that. They never did that. That was not Yahuwah's heart to have people announce that they're prophets, or that they've been, usually it was just like they would go to the Yahuwah's people. They wouldn't go to the world. They would go to Yahuwah's people, rebuke Yahuwah's people. That's what the seers, the prophets, did. They cared about Yahuwah's people. They were not going out to the world. They were not making. Oh, go ahead, brother.
So, sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. So what you're saying is that the prophets never went around saying, "I'm a prophet of Yahweh," or "I have a word from Yahweh." Basically, they didn't boast over.
Well, like they never promoted themselves, is what I'm trying to say. They never self-promoted. To be more specific, they never said, "Hey, I really think the Father's given me an agency, or in the agency of being a prophet." Like they never announced they were a prophet. It was just they were seers. Yahuwah chose them. Yahuwah put them in that spot. It wasn't like, someone like today, because of YouTube and all that, everyone's announcing that what they're in, what the agency they're in. And you never saw that in ancient Israel, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So the type of self-promotion like that, you never saw in Israel.
That's right.
You never, that was something Yahuwah would never inspire someone to do.
No.
It's kind of like, remember how Yahusha says in Matthew, when you do good deeds, don't announce it. It's kind of the same thing. Go ahead, bro.
So they definitely don't self-pronounce. I am reminded of a place where others pronounce it. For instance, the prophet that came shortly before Shaul was why am I not think it was Samuel, right? When Samuel was little and he was, I think he was serving Eli that he was serving. And he fell asleep, and Yahuwah came to him in his dream, and he kept coming, and Eli telling him, go back, it's Yahuwah speaking.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, Yahuwah appoints him a prophet. But other than that, I'm not sure we see any other places where like you actually see the person being appointed and being told this.
Yeah. But then with Nathan, my bad. I was gonna say with Nathan to you, so they knew he was a prophet of Yahuwah because every time Nathan went to prophesy or had a word from Yahuwah, they already knew he was a prophet from Yahuwah. So there had to be some type of litmus test, whether it's the fact that a lot of his prophecies came true, that he had a word from Yahuwah about, or something, because even like some of the movies, like if you ever seen the King David movie, like the Israel would be announcing, oh, Nathan the prophet's here. Like, but people would announce that they're a prophet. So what I'm trying to say is self-promotion.
Yeah.
They never self-promoted themselves, and I think you would agree. So like that's kind of the point I'm making, is like they wouldn't be like, hey guys, I'm Yahuwah's prophet.
Yeah.
They would never do that. Like that's kind of the same thing as me. I liken it to when you do righteous works, don't announce it. Like it's the same thing. Like if you're seeking your own praise and not Yahuwah's praise, you're gonna receive your gift, and that's it.
That's it. That's your reward.
That's your reward, praise from men. So to me, when you're announcing you're a prophet, you're self-promoting yourself as a prophet on video or whatever, you've already gotten your reward right there. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see that in scripture. I don't see people announcing that they themselves announcing themselves as a prophet or announcing themselves in the office of prophet. It was either, I do think, even though like you're 100% right, and I agree that Yahuwah, we don't see verbatimly in scripture Yahuwah appointing people, but clearly people are being appointed if they already know who's a prophet and who's not in those times. So there has to be some type of anointing appointing, whether it's appointed by the priests back then or something, because they already knew who were prophets and who weren't. Because the people would announce even in Saul's time, Saul is one of the prophets, because he had a real gift of prophesy by Yahuwah's spirit. He had a real gift that he was performing. So I would say maybe we don't have proof of Yahuwah appointing people in scripture, but there has to be, I guess you could say, there has to be fruit of someone being a prophet. Like they can't just say, well, I'm a prophet, and we just assume that everyone's a prophet that says they're a prophet, because to me there has to be a litmus test at some point. But anyway, that's kind of my personal opinion on it. I think prophets of Yahuwah should really, they should let other people esteem them rather
That's
than
right.
them esteeming themselves. Like, I'll give you an example. Like Jeremiah never said, hey guys, I'm a prophet. Hosea never said, hey guys, I'm a prophet. But they knew they were real prophets. They already knew, because of their works, because of the visions Yahuwah gave them, and the words of repentance Yahuwah gave them, and just their actions. They went to the people and gave a word from Yahuwah to cause them to repent. And so to me, that's another litmus test. If someone's a real prophet, their message should have something to do with repentance. Like if I hear someone say, oh, I saw Yahuwah's throne room and I was in this vision and this and that, but there's no message about telling Yahuwah's people, Israel, to repent, then that's not a real prophet. That's just someone having a vision,
Right.
or having a dream. And that's why Deuteronomy 13 says what it says. It says, if a dreamer of dreams says this to you, that to you, to depart from what you know is true, to depart from Yahuwah, you don't listen to them. And he even talks about that sometimes Yahuwah will allow that dream or dreams to cause something to come true,
Mhm.
to test you. So also we can't get caught up that a false prophet won't cause a vision to come true, because Deuteronomy 13 says otherwise. It says Yahuwah will cause that vision to come true just to test you. So anyway, so that was just, I guess that was kind of my point, is that self-promotion is not really biblical in a prophet. That's all I was trying to say. But anyway, okay. Sorry, guys, for me taking that. That was completely on me for taking that all the way to a rabbit trail there, but I felt like I needed to say that.
Mhm.
Let's see here. Vanity, grasping of the wind, spoke in my heart. Okay. I mean, pretty much this is self-explanatory stuff. Solomon's talking about, his whole life he tried to apply his heart to wisdom. Sometimes he applied his heart to wrong types of wisdom and all that, because he even talks about how, it says that, he also acquired to know what man is supposed to do to enjoy the fruits of his labors, right? And all that. So sometimes Solomon would apply his heart not just to biblical wisdom, but to every type of wisdom, and that was kind of the problem. He was like kind of trying to learn everything. Um, you know, so for him, he just feels like this is like a waste, because what man does under the sun, what can he do other than, you know, just work for a living, enjoy the fruits of his labors? Because the way he's looking at it is like a man, what he does under the sun, eventually he's going to die. So to Solomon here, everything's vanity. Everything's vain, what we do on this temporal life on earth. So that's kind of what he's saying here. Oh, this mouse of mine is acting up. I think this thing is on its last life. It's not doing anything. Oh well. Mom, would you like to read chapter 2?
Sure, sure. I just would like to bring one other point out, that the end of this chapter says, he says, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. So he's just trying to say that, he has gained more wisdom, than anybody else that came before him, but he feels that it's not always a beneficial thing, that or it's beneficial, but it's not always a happy moment, that there is darkness that comes with it. Okay. All right.
Yep.
Chapter 2. I thought in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is foolish, and what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem. Before me, I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well. Footnote, they say it's uncertain what's meant by that. Okay. As well, the delights of the heart of man. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise man has eyes in his head, while the fool walks in darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I thought in my heart, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said in my heart, this too is meaningless. For the wise man, like the fool, will not be long remembered. In days to come, both will be forgotten. Like the fool, the wise man too must die. So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool? Yet he will have control over all the work into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all toilsome labor under the sun, for a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all he owns to someone who has not worked for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What does a man get for all the toil and anxious striving for which he labors under the sun? All his days, his work is pain and grief. Even at night, his mind does not rest. This too is meaningless. A man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This too I see is from the hand of Alua. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the man who pleases him, Alua gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases Alua. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind.
Okay. Let's see something here. Interesting.
I think the elitists have taken this to heart because they know they're going to die, so they build their foundations and their trusts and all this stuff to leave to their families. But they do it for the wrong reason. They want to, rule the world, and they want to collect everything, just like they do for the Catholic Church. And so they won't have it, so their foundations will continue even when they pass away.
Interesting.
And I think the best thing we can do is store knowledge in our heart that we can take with us, that can't be taken from us. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. Huh.
As they say, metal rust and garments are eaten by moths. So they can't take the knowledge of Yahuwah from us.
Yep. Yep. Go ahead, Mom.
One thing crossed my mind, though, it's really kind of sad. Okay, he's bringing out the point that the man who has the wisdom and the one who is a fool, they'll both be forgotten. But the truth is, because of Yahuwah and his word, we have not forgotten Solomon. We have not forgotten him. He is remembered because of the many. Truly, I mean, Douglas said it one time, and it really, I've kind of hung on to it. Is that Solomon really was like somebody who had two lives. It was like there was, because we often forget, for the first 20 years of his being king, he was very focused and very worshipful, and he had done many things that we know pleased the Father. But then unfortunately things took that shift sort of halfway through his life. And but we do not forget him. We hopefully learn from him. The direction that his life took, and we try to sit here and realize all that Yahuwah gave him, and baruched him with that wisdom, which was incredible as we read some of the things that he did and said. Incredible wisdom. And but I do think it's a bit sad that he thinks that will not be remembered any more than like a foolish man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of like our forefathers when they said they developed a republic, if we can hold on to it.
What did you say, brother?
I say it's like, well, they call them our forefathers. Are you asking me?
Okay, I got you. Yeah, I was asking you just to repeat what you said before.
So we couldn't really hear it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's like our forefathers saying that we've set up a republic, if you can hold on to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
But I say forefathers loosely because that usually refers to the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Yeah, there was nothing really republic about what they set up. They set up
Yeah, like
their freedom was about freedom to sin. If you look up the what is it called? The French people, what they have back then, they had the what is it called, Mom? The revolution. The French Revolution was all about goddess worship, sex worship. So you had the French Revolution right before the Revolutionary War, and they are the ones that gave us the Statue of Liberty. So that tells you all what you need to know. So the goddess of Columbia came from them. And so they're supposed to be the so-called allies that America had. So that shows you what America was already about from the beginning. It was about freedom to sin, freedom to have lawlessness. That's what their freedom was talking about. It had nothing to do with, and I always point this out to people. They were racist, okay? So when it says all men are equal in that document, they never considered people of darker melanin as people, or as men, I should say. Okay. So like when everyone wants to quote that, okay, yeah, all men in their definition of mankind. So their definition was like the Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Definition of mankind. That's why a lot of them had slaves. A lot of them, they had no intention of African American people ever giving them the same rights, ever any of that stuff. So
Mm-mm.
You know, I definitely would suggest people research about those so-called founding fathers and what they're really about
Yeah,
because they're
Doug, you should put out that video that you sent. I think it was a few months ago. You sent that video about the true
yeah.
fathers of the founding fathers, and I mean that was a very interesting video, and it was very educational because it told you the truth about all of these people. They were all Freemason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's see here. Hidden faith of the founding. I think you can find this on Rumble too, by the way. So it's very easy to find this video.
Yeah, this
I
whole
think the
society is built.
Parable page did it. The Parable YouTube channel did it. Um, let's see. This guy did it. Shut the truth. And you got this person who uploaded it. It's like everywhere.
Oh wow.
Watch with Docurama Films. There's at least 5 or 6 different uploaders. Oh, I remember this guy. Yeah, he did a lot of stuff about Transformers years ago. The Good Fight Ministries. I remember this guy. He's pretty popular. He's
Praise the Lord, brothers and sisters. We want to welcome you to the Good Fight
stuff.
YouTube channel. Want to encourage you to
So they have it up there. There's like, oh my goodness, there's tons of uploaders for this. Here we go. Yeah, Parable. Parable is one of the ones I really like because they have the full thing. And they do a lot of other stuff too. They did the stuff about the Westcott Hort text. I really like Parable. Parable is like a religious, it's supposed to be like a religious history channel on YouTube. So it gives you like all the history of things. So what I'll do is I'll share this link in the description when we're done today, and that way people can look this up for themselves. But I recommend people to watch this stuff. If you still vote, if you still
Yeah.
think that job is to vote and you're under this false good news that's known as the social justice good news or the social gospel, they like to call it. If you really think we're commanded to vote, I recommend you check that out. So anyway, but but yeah, just a lot of people don't understand that too. And there's a lot of people of darker melanin that are Mormons today that don't know what their founder originally thought of people of darker skin. What evolution came from. Evolution wasn't just, oh, we came from monkeys. The original title of, I think, Darwin's book was called The Origin of the Species or something like that. It was like a big long title.
Yeah.
And I think he shortened it to Origins, but it was supposed to be Origins of the Species, meaning, so it also talked about in the book where black people came from and all that. And he was very similar to Joseph Smith. He thought black people were less evolved apes. That's
Wow.
literally what the creator of evolution, that's what he thought. So you got tons of people being educated in the public school system, many African American well-meaning children learning from a ideology that would be racist.
Mm.
It was a racist ideology, always was. It wasn't until like the 1990s, I think, or the 1900s that all of a sudden it was being used for like public school system and all that. Because even just Smith, he was part of that type of belief system. He was part of, I think, he would have been one of those supporting Planned Parenthood if he was alive today. He would have
Yeah,
been one of
but
those,
now we
what do you
have
call it?
now we have critical race theory, which is the
Eugenists.
opposite of
Yeah,
that.
which is so stupid because their critical race theory is like they make you think that everyone's a racist. Basically, that's what critical race theory is. It makes you put false guilt on yourself that every person in this world's a racist, and it's stupid because the only way you're racist is if you're raised to become racist. It's very clearly learned It is not something that's in you. It's something that you're taught by your parents and your grandparents. I know this because my father was one. Okay, my dad was one because he learned from
Your dad was a racist?
his parents, and he was raised in like what, on the 50s, 60s.
He was
And
born in the early 50s,
he
so
was
he
born
was
in the
raised in the
50s.
60s.
So by the time it was the 60s, he was already had that ideology in him from his upbringing. But I was never raised like that.
Doug, your dad was a racist?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he had certain tendencies. My biological father, yeah, he had certain tendencies
Oh,
that
wow.
I could tell he was racist because, you know, he would use the N word sometime. He'd be, with the hard
No.
ER, you know. Yeah, so when people, this is why it offends me when people say that I'm white privileged or all that, because I grew up with a black stepbrother. I grew up with a black stepdad. I was never racist. I was actually the opposite of my dad. I could have grew up to be like my dad, but I never did.
Exactly.
I was raised to not be racist. I was raised to judge people, not even to look at their skin. So when people, and this is why I hate critical race theory, because it tells you that ignoring someone's skin color is racist. How is that racist? That's the exact opposite of the definition of racism. The definition of racism is saying, I don't like you because of your skin color. If I ignore someone's skin color that I just meet, and I want to know their character before I judge them, that's not racist. So all this critical race theory is garbage. It is straight up garbage. And anyone that I don't want to fellowship with anyone that believes in that crap. I don't. You're not a true believer if you believe in that.
That's Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is racist.
That's Black Lives Matter. That's all this false ideology, secular ideology, which Paul says for us not to have. He says that the spirit should transform your mind to not think like the world. So if you're thinking like the world, you're not letting the spirit transform your mind. You can't have it both ways. No, I believe anyone that gets sucked into that, they can fall away from the faith if they get sucked into that. I believe that's the easiest way to fall away from the faith, because you start looking at the scriptures. In actuality, you're becoming a racist by getting sucked into that, and you're looking at the scriptures in a racist view, an anti-white view. And that's really what happens, because that's what Kamala Harris and all them were trying to do last year. Not trying to get political, but all what they've been trying to do is look at us, people of lesser melanin, as the devil. And it's been happening for the past 5-10 years, because now the white man is now the minority in America. Now the white man or the white woman is looked at as evil. The same way we looked at the Arabs around 9/11, that's what's happening to white people now. So they're training people of darker melanin to hate people of lighter melanin, and they're calling it critical race theory. That's the reality. So when people bring that up to me, oh well, you could be racist and not know it. I'm sorry, I'm calling BS on that. You'll know if you're racist. I don't need to take tests.
Definitely.
I don't need to take a test to know if I'm racist or not. I don't need. The fact of the matter that I punched a kid one time for calling a friend of mine the N-word is fruit works that shows I'm not racist. If I was racist, I would have let that one kid call him an N-word, the N-word. But no, I actually fought the kid for being racist to him. And that's why Yahushua says you'll know them by their works. I don't need a little test to tell me I'm racist or not. Okay, so that's where, honestly, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry, but anyway, getting off this topic. Because honestly, it's all secular garbage anyway. All that stuff. Go ahead, brother.
I just wanted to clarify. I believe, and I'm not sure what difference it would make, but I believe that Yahushua said you'll know them by their fruit, not their work.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing, right? Fruits and work.
I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. He said, no, it's true though. Technically, Yahushua word for word said, "You'll know them by their fruits." I think the reason I said works is because it's kind of one and the same. It's like fruits is allegory for works. So
Right.
like we look at it as coming from a Western society, we don't understand the Hebrew idioms of fruit, and we tend to. But to be fair, Brother Yahusha's right. The literal word for word quote would be, "You'll know them by their fruits." So their works are their fruit. So it's one and the same. But to not misquote him, he literally word for word said, "You'll know them by their fruit." And so my fruit in that situation was defending someone being treated unfairly because of the color of their skin, rather than treating someone unfairly because of the color of their skin. So that's why I take issue with people that want to call me racist or white privileged, because from my own fruit, I can prove to you that I'm not. So that's why I get a little pissed off. So that's why I get mad at people that say that don't know me, that should have known me for knowing me all my life, should know who I am, that really didn't know me. Because if you knew me, you would have never accused me of that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm not still mad about it. I'm just saying if you really know someone, you wouldn't even accuse someone of it, of that. Because, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm very honest about what I think about racism. I hate racism. Real racism. I'm not talking about critical race theory. I'm talking about real racism. Like Joseph Smith, I hate him because he's a racist. And Mormonism was started on racism. I hate evolution. One of the main reasons I hate evolution, not the biggest reason, but one of the main reasons is they call African Americans, like I said, like apes. They basically look at them like apes or less evolved monkeys. Okay, that's why I hate evolution. But I also hate it because it denies you of being the creator.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Fruit would be characteristics like love. Okay. I mean, I would agree to disagree on that. Because if you look in the whole Old Testament, fruit is equated to works. And your characteristics is part of your works. Your characteristics leads you to doing what you do. Like, if I'm a real believer, it's going to lead to works. I understand the contention there with fruit technically meaning characteristics, but if you look at the Old Testament, it's always defined as works. That's why it talks about David when he wrote in Psalms 1. He says they will produce fruit. Producing something means you're doing something. So fruit is always almost 110% in the Old Testament is works. And rarely is it characteristics. Rarely. I get where people get that from in Galatians.
The fruit of the Spirit.
I understand that, but you can't take one context and interpret when Yahusha is talking about something else. That's like, he's saying that because even in the whole context of Yahusha saying you know them by their fruit, he's talking about what they're doing. He's saying if they're like, that's where we get the whole analogy of two different trees, right?
Right.
So, for example, a rotten tree, an evil person, cannot produce good works.
That's right.
Right fruit. Can't. It's impossible. So that's what he means by that. So I'm just trying to explain what I personally believe, according to the Old Testament definition of it, it has to be referring to works. I understand where Galatians comes into play, but I think that's a different context. And even with Galatians, the characteristics of not hating, not all that eventually is going to produce some type of work, right? Like real love, 1 Corinthians 13, all that. That real love, you're eventually going to work that out physically in your life. Because if it is, then it's not a real fruit. It's just, mentally in your mind. It's just, if it doesn't produce anything, it's not a real fruit. So that's just my personal opinion on that. Because looking at the whole counsel of the Bible, fruit, I would say in the Old Testament, I could be wrong, but it's like 90 to 100% of the time is defined as work in the Old Testament. So we can't take something from Paul and then make our own definition of it. So Paul can't make a new definition of what fruit is what I'm trying to say. So even if it is characteristics, what I'm trying to say is those characteristics have to lead to works if they're real fruit of the Spirit.
Right.
Like, I think what happened is we've been trained in Christianity to look at Galatians like that's a new definition on what fruit is, and then we're like, and we're not even really taught what he's talking about in Galatians, a correct understanding of even the characteristics of the fruit of the Spirit, because we're taught, a hippie type of love. We're taught a hippie type of being merciful to one another. We're taught never to be judgmental, which again is unscriptural, because Yahusha judged all the time. Okay, so we're taught like a really like 1970s understanding of fruit of the Spirit, and that's why we only see it as in the mind. But if it's really in your mind and in your heart, you're going to do it. It's going to be a physical action. So that's why I believe a real fruit, fruit has to be connected to the actions at some point. It can't just be something you believe or something that's an ideology and it stops there, because then it's not producing anything. And another place where Yahusha talks about it, I think, right, he says, I chose you so that you bear to
Yes.
And obviously in that context he's talking about doing righteous works. He's talking about doing works of the law. He's talking about, okay, I've chosen you. Every tree that does not bear two fruit will be thrown in the fire. Yep. So I just wanted to explain why I believe actions have to be connected to the characteristics of the fruit. Like it has to be. It can't be one or the other. It has to be connected. It can't be, because then it's just beliefs. Yeah. So that's all I'm trying to say. I wasn't trying to be argumentative. I'm just saying that if it's just what you think in your mind, then that would be similar to how James says, right? Belief of itself is dead. So, you're not really bearing true fruit if it's just in your mind.
Right.
Or what you believe. It's because in Hebrew, your belief turns into something. Your fruit should be walked out. And if it's not walked out, it's not real fruit. It's dead fruit. So that's what I truly believe from what we see. But anyway,
I think I could maybe possibly pull this together. I do think that portion of Galatians where he's explaining the manifestations, the fruit of the Spirit, and when we do have those things, our lives are going to produce the works. Our lives, when we have patience, kindness, self-control, all those things that are talked about in Galatians, when they become a reality in our lives, then yes, we will bear good fruit. We will bear the good works and the good things. So that's kind of what I believe about that.
Yeah, it has to be both. I
think so.
There has to be somewhere trust at some point that's producing that fruit. There has to be a belief, a trust that's producing that. If not, then Yahusha doesn't consider it fruit anyway. He would consider it dead rags. Filthy rags to him. If there's no mix of trust involved. That's why it says, right? It says about the Israelites, what they had, they did not mix with belief or trust. So they did not mix it with belief. Without the trust, true trust in there, all the works they ever did, even righteous works, meant nothing to the Father. He's like, listen, you don't even trust in me. So how am I supposed to look at these works that you're doing as anything?
Yeah.
They would try to go through the motions, do this, do that, and then worship Baal. It's like, you can do all these physical acts of righteousness, but if you're not trusting in me, what's the point? That's why I firmly believe that when we're witnessing to people, I would not start with the repenting before the believing. That's why I'm a firm believer of, if we're witnessing to, whether it's a Christian, Muslim, whoever, they need to have the trust in the right person, the true good news in the right person, before they're worried about keeping Torah. Because Yahuwah is going to look at anyone, because trust me, the heathen have good works. They have good works. They've done righteous things in their lives. But that's not going to matter. They're going to be on Judgment Day, and they're going to be wanting in the scale, because they did not receive Yahusha. They did not receive the Basora. They did not mix it with trust. they just had these certain times in their life they did righteous things. I kind of respected my mother and my dad and this and that. You'll see them on Judgment Day saying this and that, and who's going to be like, but did you trust in me? Did you trust in my son's sacrifice? Did you do that? No, that's the prerequisite. The prerequisite is being grafted in first, then worry about obeying the law. If you try to do it first, it's not going to mean anything without belief or trust. And that's why Paul says what he says about, he talks about how, if you try to be justified by you just keeping the law of yourself, and you don't, and your trust is no longer in Yahusha and what he did on the stake, but your trust is in your own works, it won't benefit you. Those works won't benefit you, and you'll fall from favor and all that. So sorry for the again going through a rabbit trail, but I just kind of wanted to explain that too. That that was Israel's problem, was they thought they could just do these works, and all these works of the law was gonna make them right with Yahuwah without the trust. And that's kind of how they went through the majority of the prophets. You'll see that's how they look at it. They look at it almost like a Christian looking at going to Sunday church every Sunday and then sitting all week and all that. Anyway, go ahead, bro. I'm sorry for taking up all the time.
Oh no, that's fine. Honestly, I think that we're saying the same thing different ways. I don't think that we're really. Let me reiterate. I don't think that roots and fruit they work in tandem. I don't think that they're one and the same, but I think that they work in tandem, and you can't have one without the other. I mean, you can, but it just doesn't work. And what I mean, so you have Isaiah 1:13-15, right? Bring no more futile offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. Your new moon's an appointed feast my soul hates. When you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you, even though you make many prayers. So here they're doing the works, right? But the fruit is rotten, or like you said, like they don't have any trust in Yahweh. They're just doing it to be doing it, and so they're empty works without the fruit. And then Ezekiel 33:31, and they come to you as people do, and they sit before you as my people, and they hear your words, but they do not do them. For with their mouth they show much love, but their heart pursue their own gain. So we have works that are being done. The works are there, but the trust is not there, or the fruit is not there. And so even though the work should be in tandem with the fruit, they're not always. Sometimes the work is there, but the fruit is rotten, or sometimes the fruit is there and the work is rotten. The work is not on point. Does that make any sense?
Things. It's kind of like, it's a lot easier to just say, okay, I'm going to bring this animal, I'm going to do this. I know I've been taught this since childhood, and it's very easy to do those things. But if it's not heartfelt, if it's not, I want to bring this sacrifice to you because I love you with all my heart, soul, and strength. If it's not that, then that's why he said that. He wants no part of it. It's just vain, idle. You could equate it to the prayers that the Catholics say every Mass. They don't think about what they're saying. They just go in there and by rote they just ramble it off. So it's anyway.
Well, also that's a different type of works. That's traditions.
Exactly. Yes.
He wouldn't even consider that two works.
No, I realize that.
This contention is more about, is the fruit itself the righteous works of the law, or does it lead to righteous works? And I think what me and Brother Yahushua just had a slight disagreement on. So, yeah. The reason I never saw it like that before is, like I said, in the Tanakh, it seems to be equated with it. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but that's the only, it was it was a very slight disagreement that me and him had.
Yeah.
I always saw it as the fruit is the work, because that's the way it's worded in Psalms. That's the way it's worded. It's like, it's saying he's causing you to do something. He's causing
Mhm.
like the characteristic would be what I already am in my soul, but what like my characteristic doesn't produce anything. Who I am as a person does not produce anything. His spirit is causing me to produce
Mhm.
that fruit. I guess that's always how I saw it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I always saw it. Like the fruit is the action. The fruit is actually what you're doing.
Mhm.
That's why it says, a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree produces, because what's coming out of you is not what you believe. What coming out of you is what you do. Even though I agree with Brother Yahusha, it's related to what you believe, and I would agree with that. I guess it's semantics. What we're disagreeing about, it doesn't. It's semantics. It's a minor difference at this point, but just that's how I've always looked at it. Maybe I'm wrong. Go ahead, bro.
So then I would ask the question, do good works always produce good fruit? Does good works always mean that you have good fruit or fruit at all?
Um, well, I would say two characteristics can only be. I would say that if you're not in Yahuwah, you could at points in your life produce certain works that Yahuwah would deem good works if you were in him, but it's not really counted as it if you're not in him. So, like, I guess the way I would explain it is when a believer is producing two fruit because of Yahuwah's spirit, and it's Yahuwah doing it through them, it's going to be consistent. Even though we fall and mess up, it's going to be mostly consistent. The fruit and the characteristics in our lives. When a heathen or a non-believer does it, they're also it's like they have two fruit and bad fruit mixed in with one another. It's almost like the tree of life. The best way I could explain it would be like the tree of life, right? A real believer in Yahuwah is the tree of life. Then you have people of the world are the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Mhm.
So they got mixed fruit. So they're not consistent. They're, one day, they'll even talk about, oh, I have my good days and my bad days. You ever heard that from people?
Mhm.
They're not consistently producing two fruit or having those characteristics of the fruit of the spirit. They're lacking, especially in the fruit of the spirit. I would say they might be able to produce two works, but the characteristics that we're talking about from Galatians, they don't have. So it's like a non-believer won't have both. They'll usually have, and I would say I would say it's almost impossible when we're talking about what Paul talks about in Galatians. Most non-believers are lacking in almost all of those things that he's talking about as fruits of the spirit, because quite frankly, they don't understand what true love is. They don't understand what obviously they're going to have hatred in their heart if Yahuwah is not in them. There's gonna be tons of things
Mhm.
that they might be able to do righteous things because they're taught to do these things, but their heart's not really in it.
Mhm.
It's all about impressing people or wanting to say, hey, look how good I am.
Mhm.
Kind of like the Pharisees. So I would
Mhm.
I would compare it to the apostles. The way the fruit was in them was a complete tube fruit and characteristics of the fruit of the spirit. And you look at the Pharisees, that's kind of how the world was or is. They're like they know how to do certain works, but they don't have the characteristics of his ruach. They don't have the characteristics of how you're supposed to be in the faith. And they just know how to do certain works of the law. They know how to tie the cumin and do this and do that. But their heart's not there because they don't give mercy. They don't give, they're not caring for the poor even of their own people. They're all about themselves. They're selfish. So I would definitely say that those that are in Yahuwah should have both. Now, are now is it guaranteed that we're always going to have both? No, but we should. And in reality, we should. That should be the goal, is that we should have, all this stuff together, like you were saying, like together. That's the goal. But when you look at a non-believer, a lot of the times they'll have they'll respect their mom and their dad to a certain extent. They'll do this, they'll do that. They'll do certain works that are in the Torah without even knowing that it's in the Torah. Like Paul says, they got a law to themselves. But when it comes to the characteristics, I think a lot of them just naturally don't have those characteristics because they have another spirit in them. They have another. They serve another mighty one. So they're not going to have. And if they do claim they have the fruit of the spirit, it would be what Christianity has manipulated as the fruit of the spirit, like loving everyone, and you never offend someone. They teach that's fruit of the spirit. You don't offend, you don't do this, you don't ever cause arguments. You shouldn't be argumentative and this or that. So that's how I would define what it looks like to have the works without the characteristics versus both, which is what the goal is. That's the goal for us to be, is to have both the characteristics of the fruit of the spirit along with the works that should come from them. So there, but the only reason I had a different interpretation of fruit is because of maybe what I've seen in the Tanakh, and like I said, maybe, and I'm not saying I'm perfect in my understanding, maybe I'm misunderstanding the way Daoud is using it and the way other writers are using it. I could be mistaken. So I'm not claiming I have a perfect understanding of this. I'm just saying that from what I've seen, that it seems to be that's what fruit is defined as in the Tanakh. And the only time I really see it being defined as characteristics is when Paul's talking about it. But I think the reason Paul is talking about like against such there's no law and all that, that's supposed to be like that's in a way, yes, it's characteristics, but in a way, those characteristics by default, if we have them, there should be works coming from those characteristics. So the reason I think Paul even brings that out in 1 Corinthians 13 as well is that if you don't have these things, it might be impossible for you to have really true fruit if you don't have these characteristics. Like, for example, if I don't love you, right? If I don't love my brother, can I produce tube fruit in that area? Not really. If I don't love my mother, I'm not going to produce a work of honoring my mother or respecting my mother. If I don't love Yahuwah, am I really going to want to keep the Sabbath? I mean, by default, these things, these characteristics, right, should lead to the works. And so I think that's what Paul's talking about when he's talking about, real love is not selfish, real love is not hateful. And he's talking about all this stuff in Galatians and Corinthians. He's trying to say, listen, like, this is how we should think and act. This is how we should be. And if not, you're a rotten tree. If not, because I think John, right, in 1 John says, who can love Yahuwah and hate his brother? It's impossible to love Yahuwah and hate his brother who he has seen, and to love Yahuwah who he hasn't seen. So that's kind of how I look at it. I could be wrong, but I think it's like, and I think we're agreeing here. We're just saying like different aspects that there's, it has to be connected. So like if and I see how it could be disconnected, because right, I could be doing these works and lacking maybe the mentality in my heart, maybe lacking like one or two things of the fruit of the spirit, but yet producing righteous works. But I think in Yahuwah's eyes, if I'm doing that, he probably would look at me as that's dirty rags, probably. So that wouldn't even count to him if I'm doing that. If I'm producing righteous fruit, turning away from sin in my life, but then treating my brother horribly, you break one law, you break them all.
Yeah.
So, I think that's how I kind of look at it. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, but I haven't really looked into that for a while too. I'll be honest. I haven't really studied about what fruit is according to the scriptures as a whole. But yeah.
Mhm.
It would be a tube thing for us to study about in the future. So I don't want my mom's hotspot going out. So I think I'm gonna power through here and get chapter 3 read for us. Unless
Mhm.
someone else wants to read, I don't want to take anyone's chance away. But I know my mom's hotspot is going to be running out soon. So let me just see here. So Ecclesiastes 3, to everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. And yeah, there's gonna be a little differences. Heaven, heavens. I think in the Greek is singular. A
Please,
time
if
to
you need
give.
someone to read.
Oh, okay. Sure, sis, if you want to read this chapter.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Okay, just leave it up there. Okay, so I'm reading from verse 2, or should I start at 1?
Yeah, you can start at verse 2. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was muted.
A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Why would he want to gather stones?
Maybe to make a fire? I know they have to gather sticks. I wonder if stones had something to do with it. Because, right, Mom, if you rub two stones together, doesn't it create a fire?
Yeah, that's true.
I wonder if that's what they were doing back then. Like when the Numbers 15, I think was the chapter 13, where the guy got stoned for gathering sticks on the Sabbath. I don't know. It's possible. Go ahead, bro.
Okay. A
I'm
time
looking.
oh, go ahead.
No, finish the chapter.
Okay. A time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for battle and a time for peace. What does the worker gain from all his toil? I have seen the task Elohim has given to the sons of men to be humbled by it. There is an excellency in Yahuwah's works. He has made it all beautiful in its time, even the ages he has put in their hearts, except that no one finds out the work that Elohim does from beginning to end. I know that there is no good for them but to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and also that every man shall eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is a gift of Elohim. I know that whatever Elohim does is forever. There is no adding to it, and there is no taking from it. Elohim does it, that men should fear before him. Whatever is has already been, and what shall has been before. But Elohim seeks out what has been pursued. But as for man, God, Elohim shall judge his works hereafter. Through here he be like a beast. He be like a beast. Then again, I saw under the sun, in the place of right ruling, wrongness was there. And in the place of righteousness, wrongness was there. I said in my heart, Elohim judges the righteous and the wrong, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart, go down. Concerning the matter of the sons of men, Elohim selects them so as to see that they themselves are beasts. For the event of the sons of men is also the event of beasts. One event befalls them as one dies, so dies the other. Indeed, they all have one breath. Man has no advantage over beast, for all is futile. All are going to one place. All came from the dust, and all return to dust. Who knows the spirit of the sons of men, which goes upward, and the spirit of the beast, which goes down to the earth? So I saw that man could do no better but to rejoice in his own works, for that is his position. For who would bring him to see what shall be after him? Now, when it talks about, go back there, Doug. Did we lose Doug? So when it talks about for the events of sons of men, it's also the events of beasts. Is that talking about the hybrids?
What verse are you referring to?
Verse 19, because it talks
19.
about the sons of men, also the event of beasts. One event befalls them, as one dies, so dies the other. Indeed, they all have breath.
Yeah, so what it's trying to say here is we're like beasts the way we act, especially sinful mankind is like a brutal beast in our characteristics. So not that it's talking about hybrids, but it's talking about like a wicked person is like a brutal beast, kind of like a dog returning to its own vomit and all that. So Solomon's trying to say that like mankind is not much different from the wild beasts of the field. We're in a temporal life here on earth where just as the beasts die, we die. It seems like it's also saying, which I would have to take correction in this because I always believed the opposite, but it seems like it's also saying that the beasts have a breath of life in them. So I would have to take back what I used to think that they don't have souls or spirits.
Right.
I never saw this verse before. So man has no advantage over the beasts. All are futile, but it also says all have one breath.
Yeah, but it also says that man goes upward and the beast goes down to earth. Oh, but it's asking the question, so it's saying, okay, man goes upward, so do beasts go down to earth or do they all go to the same place? Because it's a question that it's asking at the end,
Yeah.
verse 21, which goes down to the earth.
Yeah. Solomon a lot of the times his beliefs were kind of a pre-resurrection, I think, mindset. Like he didn't know, I don't think a lot of them knew about the resurrection back then. And so like I think what he's trying to say is all go to one place. Is there any benefit for the man? I think is what it should be saying. All are returning because the ISR here it says all came to the dust, all came from dust, and all return to dust. Who knows the spirit of the sons of men which goes upward? So it's not that men go upward, it's the spirit of man that goes upward. And the spirit of the beast which goes down to there. So I guess what he's trying to say, the only difference he can see is that the spirit of the wild beasts don't go back to Yahuwah. They go down to Sheol, which I'm not too varied with that concept, but he according to what Solomon's saying here, he's saying like it says in other places in Ecclesiastes that when a man dies and goes down to Sheol, the spirit, the breath of life Yahuwah gave, goes back to him who gave it. Now, I'm so it seems like it's saying that the spirit he's given animals though doesn't, or maybe he's posing the question like you said. See, the problem is question marks were not in the original text. This is the problem. Is it a question or is it a statement? Because he's saying here, who knows the spirit of the sons of men, which goes upward? So the spirit, not the men themselves, the spirit of the sons of men, which goes upward, and the spirit of the beast, which goes down to the earth. So I think the question, if it is a question, he's posing is who knows the difference? Who knows, who knows the distinction? And I think what he's trying to bring us back to is that Yahuwah knows the distinction. What's interesting here is the Septuagint has an answer here, and it says nothing. There's no difference. Nothing, for all is vanity. So this is kind of interesting. So okay, so it does say no, has no advantage. So okay, I see what happened here. The language is a little different in the ISR. Go ahead, brother. I meant to call on you before. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no worries. I wanted to go back to what you were talking about gathering stones and throwing. And I wanted to just read some of the information that I pulled up in regards to that, because like I was reading it and it was looking definite, even though I could see the literal, it definitely looked more figurative, metaphoric to me. So you have hold on, let me go to it. Okay, so you have a time to throw stones, right? Um, several cultural or symbolic meanings: destruction, breaking down, throwing stones to ruin a field, disrupt work, or judge a city. Isaiah 5:2 speaks of removing stones in vineyard preparation. Conflict or judgment: stoning was a punishment, and throwing stones could symbolize hostility. Right, so you have a time to throw stones and then a time to gather stones. It says that gathering stones could mean building, reconstructing, gathering stones to repair structures, build altars, or clear fields for planting, or also ending hostility. Ancient covenants sometimes involved piling stones as a peace marker. Genesis 31:46 with Jacob and Laban. Um, so while throwing and gathering stones were literal activities in ancient times, warfaring, farming, judgment, and construction, the context in Ecclesiastes suggests a deeper symbolic meaning. Given the parallel poetic structure, this phrase likely refers to seasons of destruction versus rebuilding and separation versus restoration, which would keep in contact with the whole chapter. You have like this and this compared with this and this, and this and this compared with this and this. Like, you go to the actual chapter, right? A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to lament and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. So I can see that pointing to like, a time to throw stones, meaning destruction, judgment, whether you're stoning people, whatever that looks like, or a time to gather stones, right? Like where there's not judgment, where there's peace. Um, yeah, interesting.
Interesting. I forgot about that allegory. I forgot about that idiom. I honestly, it never came to my mind when I was thinking about that question that Marissa asked. Yeah, that I forgot about that. Yeah, so technically gathering stones, yeah, yeah, you could allude to that being talking about stoning people. I don't know why I didn't think about that. Um, so yeah, I was probably just focusing on the physical of it. Like I guess I was looking at the word gather as in getting stones. I don't know. That happens a lot. I sometimes focus too much on the physical. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely see what you're talking about, like time for judgment versus time for actual stoning the person versus mercy. Yeah, I never thought of that.
Also, what else comes to mind is that we're likened unto stones, right? We're the stones Yahuwah is, or that Yahushua is refining. Um, and so I could see that where it says a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. I could see that as pointing to um, there's a time to, get rid of a person. There's a time to cut a person off, um, and to throw them away, to, remove them from your life if they're not doing what they need to be doing as far as the Torah. And then there's a time to gather, to embrace. Um, so I see that as well.
I don't know. Go ahead, mom.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I wasn't cutting anybody off, was I?
No, no, no.
Okay.
We were
One thing
is that Solomon does have some love for the animals. At one point he says a righteous man cares for the needs of his animal. I think he did have a really maybe more than an average, love from other kings or other people. But I see that in him. As you know what, we know how David loved his sheep. We know that he put his life at risk for his sheep for the safety. So I think in their genealogy, you might say there was a real love for animals, which is probably why he brings the whole beast thing up to begin with. But it's just my looking at it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think to compare us to beasts is mainly like the example of this would be Nebuchadnezzar.
Mm-hmm.
How he became so wicked that Yahuwah to punish him made him literally a beast. So to Yahuwah, brutal beasts are sometimes a idiom for wicked men.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even some speculations about where it talks about how the serpent was the most brutal, was more brutal than all the brute beasts,
Mm-hmm.
or more wise unto evil, the Targums say, than the brutal beasts of the earth. So there's been a lot of conspiracies like about co-atomism, which I'm not totally against. I'm not totally against co-atomism, the idea that when Adam and Kua were first created, that Yahuwah would have stopped with them, he would have created other humans at the same time, which I'm not totally against. If that's the case, that when it says the brute beasts, the wild beasts of the field, that if it's allegorical, technically you have wicked people being talked about, and it's saying, that the Nakash, Satan, was more subtle than these brutish beasts. So if that's the case and those people that believe that are correct, then technically you do have co-atomism there, technically. Um, I'm not saying that is not true. I'm not saying that I know that is true. I'm just saying that sometimes in the Torah and in Tanakh, you'll see wicked people being called brutish beasts. Go ahead, brother.
I would agree that definitely people are referred to as brute beasts. However, I think that if there were wicked people existing in that time, around the time where it talks about the Nephilim, likened unto the more Hakam than the brute beast, I think that in order for that to be true, it would have to mean that there were people that had fallen and sinned before Adam.
Okay, true. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, yeah, yeah. One person brought in something interesting. I never thought of that actual verse. Is that it doesn't say that the serpent was one of those beasts. It just says that he was more cunning than them, or he was smarter than the beasts of the field. Not that he was one of them. So, like, a lot of people misunderstand that and think it's saying that he's one of the beasts of the field. Which, if that's the case, and it's a literal beast of the field, then you have an issue there, because a serpent is not a beast. It's a reptile. So if you're going to say he's one of the beasts of the field, then you have an issue there, even on a language standpoint. Go ahead, brother.
I wonder if a possible workaround could be that you had people at the same time and they were referred to as brute beasts, not because of their wickedness, but because, like beasts, they just, you know, did whatever they were created to do, nothing outside of that. And we see Adam and Hua like that, right? They don't think outside really for themselves. They do exactly what they were created to do, nothing more, nothing less, until they sin, right? And then, it's a whole completely different story after that. So I wonder if, if we refer to brute beasts in that aspect.
Yeah, I guess it would be similar to what the world has kind of made fun of caveman or cave people as like, because that's what they kind of look like. They kind of make fun of any type of human being that like is not civilized or hasn't been assimilated in society. So sometimes they'll even make fun of people that are, off the grid and say, you guys are like cavemen or whatever. Because, to the world, if you're not assimilated with everything and modern technology and this and that, you're brutish. So I can kind of see what you're talking about from the flip side of how the world would look at people like Adam and Kua if they were alive today. They would look at them like they were like cavemen, and all that. And sometimes when you're even talking to someone and you talk about like the headship of men and women, they'll say that's caveman thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
They even have an idiom for that. They'll say, "Yo, that's caveman thinking." Women, being a housewife, and that's caveman thinking. So, yes, I kind of see what you're talking about. But I think you were more pointing out the fact that they're just simpler. They had a simpler existence and brutish in a way that they just did what Yahuwah told them, kind of like how the beasts just do what Yahuwah tells them to do. And there's no outside of that. It's a simple life. So I can definitely see what you're talking about. But a lot of people in this world, in this modern society, would call that like caveman thinking. That oh, you're like a Neanderthal.
Yeah.
And all that. Anything that's biblical, they would consider caveman thinking. You know. But anyway, but yeah, that's a possibility. Um, I just think there was something about, I think it was mainly just focusing, I think in that verse in Genesis, it's just focusing on that that Satan was really smart, is what it was saying, that he's more subtle than them. He's smarter. He's and even if it's regular beasts, it would make sense. If Satan's a fallen angel, he's going to be 10 times smarter than a beast of the field. So even if you were going to take it to the extreme literal, that's talking about wild beasts of the field, yes, Satan is not one of them. He's a higher being. He's higher intelligence, and he knows a lot of things that the beasts of the field would not know.
No.
Even even if you want to take it allegorically, like it's talking about a brute person, Satan would know a lot more than that person, because he was in heaven. Who has showed him all these things? He showed him all these things in heaven, and that's why when the Watchers came down, they shared all this knowledge they were not supposed to share. And Yahuwah reprimanded a lot of them, especially Azazel, and said, because of Azazel, all this has happened on the earth. And so they're either way. I contend that it's not talking about a snake versus wild beasts. That's my personal opinion contention, that just because he's called the serpent doesn't mean it's talking about like some little garden snake on a tree that was supposedly smarter than the oxes and all that, which I guess you could prove that with biology, but I don't know how much smarter a snake is than an ox or a cow or a horse. That's you kind of have to do a lot of mental gymnastics with the text if you're going to say it's talking about a literal snake. But if you got a heavenly seraphim being that is fallen from heaven, that knows all the secrets of heaven, or at least some of them, obviously his IQ of itself is going to be more than an oxen or more than a ram. That's just common sense. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. I would like to do a future study about what actually was the serpent in the garden and what actually was going on there, because a lot of it has to do with the seraphim. A lot of it has to do with the word serpent being misunderstood in our Greco-Roman culture.
Yep.
Because we look at the word serpent, we think snake. We don't even think of it being like a characteristic title or being called a serpent because he's sly and seductive.
Right.
So that's a tube study I would like to do in the future with our fellowship here. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us. So hopefully stay tuned, guys. And Yahuwah willing, Yahushua willing, we will be back next week. And Shabbat Shalom, everyone. For all of you out there that are on a similar calendar, I just want to say ahead of time, I hope you guys are going to have a great feast season coming up. We should be having a new moon, I think, in a couple of weeks here. I think it's the 29th or 30th. I think it's the 30th. So we'll be having we'll be having a new moon later this week. So hopefully, guys, I'll try my best to be available to do that and try to do a study of some kind with our fellowship. So stay tuned, everyone. Have